Hi there, my name's Ben and I like to read. Today we're going to be reviewing one of the fathers of Western literature, Western philosophy, and who has left an unbelievable mark in the human canon of literature, and that is Marcus Tullius Cicero's On the Good Life. Now, a little bit of background about the author. So Cicero, as we say it in English, in the classical Latin is pronounced Cicero. Marcus Tullius Cicero was a Roman statesman, an orator, a lawyer in the late Republican period, in the early Principate. He was very, very well known for his speeches on Roman virtue and Roman values, and was looked to as the greatest orator of his time, and is easily considered to be one of the greatest ever. He was a staunch opponent of Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, their populares, who were very much a populist movement, who were competing for control of the Senate, whereas Cicero was a member of the optimates, which is the good men. They're sort of like the old boys club, conservative members of Roman society who were not populist at all. They were very much concerned with keeping the status quo. Essentially, for opposing Julius Caesar's faction, it's something that he would end up going to exile for and eventually being executed for, with his, this could get graphic, with apparently his head and his hands being severed and delivered to the wives of those of whose husbands he slandered. Apparently, one going so far as to stabbing his tongue with a pen, so that way he may never speak ill of her family again. So he was certainly one who didn't pull any punches, and certainly one who was equal parts popular and disliked in his lifetime as well. However, in death, he is universally considered to be one of the greatest ancient thinkers. His work essentially survived the tumultuous Dark Ages. It was kept in monasteries and it was translated into Latin, or rather, I should say, it was already written in Latin, but it was translated into different languages after being kept alive by the Catholic Church. And thankfully, these are some books that they decided not to burn, and I'm very happy that they did decide to keep it, because it offers such a range of discussion, and there are so many topics. However, the one that he was most concerned about is the one that we're going to be discussing today, which is the good life. Cicero's very famous motto, "Good men are always happy." Let's talk about that. Essentially, what On the Good Life is, it's a compilation of diverse writings. So, like the discussions at Tusculum. There's a couple of sections from his On Duties book, and others as well, on the Orator. And essentially, these are collections of his writings that are put essentially into a coherent manifesto, if you will, as to what someone's good life, as to what a man's good life should be. And essentially, the main things for Cicero are, your virtue has to be one. As the paterfamilias, you have to act accordingly in a specific way. You have to have integrity, and of course you have to be happy. Right, and I mean, I'm very, very much I'm oversimplifying it here, but again, Cicero is one of those people who just, if he was alive today, it would have an unbelievable impact. Regardless, it was definitely these not even once in a generation, but once in a lifetime. Not even once in a lifetime, like once in an existence type of mind. Such a fantastically original thinker. And again, this is coming from a guy who not only served as a soldier in his earlier years, although he particularly didn't enjoy it, He was one of the few men actually who completed the cursus honorum, which essentially in ancient Rome was that pathway for citizens to to ascend to the top of the political hierarchy. And he was a fantastic speaker, as I mentioned. He was a good jurist. He was a lawyer as well, back at a time before law back then wasn't so much how we think of it today, with a judge and two lawyers fighting at it. There was often no judge, and you would have to argue your case, or eventually there would be a magistrate, but there was no real codex of laws that in order to enforce or to argue against. You essentially just had to make your argument convincing enough and hope that that it carries the day. But Cicero, again, is one of those people that on the good life. This is someone who, despite the power that he wielded, despite the very many gifts that he had, this is someone, of course, who loved debate, who loved to have that, had that zeal for searching for the truth. But again, he would be easily as comfortable discussing it with friends in his home over a glass of wine, or writing. He had some correspondences with Mark Antony as well, and with others, where essentially they discuss philosophical topics. And it's through these writings really that you see, okay, like obviously there's some Stoic influence coming in there, but this is someone who's trying his very, very hardest, not only to practice what he preaches and live up to what he expects of himself, but this is someone who's trying to keep it as simple as possible. He's trying to keep it as practical as possible, but also he's trying to find the most simple and the most practical truth of our existence. And I think that's why it's very, very important. It's important that everyone should read him. I would say don't skip out on it. However, this is translated from the original Latin. Penguin Classics, the version that I have, does a fantastic job of doing so. If you want to flex on them, shout out to all the people who study classics. If you want to flex on them, read it in the original Latin, and because why not? You'll get more from it. Of course, mine is very rusty, so I read mine in English. I would say that it's kind of a tough read. You are going to have to go back a couple of times just to really get the full context. There are some appendices. The version that I have, there's maps in it and whatever. There is a little bit at the beginning. There's an introduction and some descriptions of Greek and Latin terms. Aside from that, though, not a whole lot of footnotes. So you're going to have to do some research with reading this. But I mean, again, this isn't necessarily a book that you're going to take to the beach with you. This isn't a book that you're going to, recommend to your monthly book club. This is a book for people who have that zeal and that thirst for life and for knowledge and for truth. And it is a necessary stepping stone in order to pass. I'm not sure how you would describe that. Anyway, again, word selection is important. One take, that's all we do. I would say that it is a necessary marker in order to pass through a checkpoint, if you will, because this is, by reading Cicero, you will be put in a frame of mind that is inquisitive, that is practical, that is pragmatic, but also you will see how concepts like virtue and duty don't interfere with that concept of happiness. If anything, they support it. It's like in order to have integrity, in order to be happy, you have to have integrity. You have to have duty and responsibility. That's the only way to be happy. And I think there is some truth to that. I think that again, if we were all just aimless, people like to bandy around meaning, like what would it all mean, and just spiral into an existential hole, and get anxious about about nothing. I thoroughly castigate and repudiate that and set it off to the side. Meaning doesn't matter. Meaning is overrated. Nothing matters ultimately. But what I got from Cicero, and what Cicero actually is saying, is that sure, whatever, maybe it won't, maybe it doesn't matter, right? But you still have to, but if you stick to your duty, and if you stick to being virtuous, and you have your responsibility, you will be happy. And I mean, anecdotally, it's true. I mean, once you're when you give someone responsibility, let's say if you're a boss and you're delegating responsibility onto an employee. Now, yeah, sure, someone might be like, oh, why is he giving me more work? But by and large, they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, he trusts me to go to handle this section of the business right now. I want to thrive, and I want to make sure that I'm doing a good job. It gives them that little bit of extra jolt, what some people could construe as meaning, to do a better job. It's a little bit more of an incentive. And of course, maybe that's the little spur, the little poke that they need in order to get them going on the right path, in order for them to actualize their potential. So there is, I agree with Cicero to say that when you have duty and responsibility, I mean, of course you're going to be happy. If we were to just have no responsibilities, and as I hear so many people say these days, oh, how great would it be not to go to work, not to have to worry anything. It's an infantilization of it. I get it. You're nostalgia. You want to be a kid, run around and eat dirt, and only think about Transformers. I get it. Like, especially given the world that we live in, I wouldn't blame you, but I will blame you for not embracing the paradoxically liberating experience of responsibility and really falling into it. And no one said it's going to be easy. Cicero himself says it's not easy, right? But life is one of those things that is still worth living, despite all of its tragedies, despite the fact that it can be nasty, that it can be brutish, and unlike what Hobbes said, that it can be nasty, brutish, and long, so you have to deal with that for quite some time. But that view overlooks the fact that, okay, when you take ownership and responsibility, and you stick to your guns, you stick to your virtues, that is a much more rewarding experience, because you're living life on your own terms, right? Now you have a weapon for which to combat all of that suffering. And I think that this is why these books are so important. Books like this are so important because they allow us to not only see that, what was happening, what people were thinking 2,000 years ago is really not all that different than what we're thinking these days today. People are still trying to find that truth. They're still trying to find meaning in their lives, or purpose, or whatever you want to call it, some reason to get up in the morning. And this provides a really, really fresh perspective as to why you should. So for that reason, I have to recommend it to everybody. I will say that it is a little bit of a tough read, but if you can push through it, if you can take that responsibility on yourself, I think that it will be that the rewards far outweigh the suffering. If you're not the biggest fan of Latin, if you're not the biggest fan of classical literature and whatever, and I'll admit it was a tough read. Yes, I would rather be reading something else, but if I'm reading for entertainment. But as I mentioned, this is not a book for entertainment. This is a book for learning. Right? This is a book for if you want to learn more about yourself, if you want to learn more about how to restructure your life, and this is a book that is supremely necessary if that's the case. So, if you've read it, let me know what your thoughts were in the comments down below. And if you haven't read it yet but want to, pick it up, give it a read, and let me know what you thought in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.